Hi, it's Wayne from howtofish.com.au. I went fishing recently, but I did something a little bit different. I fished with a float, went to a little dam, had some great fun, and I'd like to share with you just some of the techniques I used to catch a few fish.
I was really keen to get some float fishing in. Hadn't done it for a while, looking around for spots, and I thought I'd go to this little dam. Now, this little dam is like many water retarding basins around Melbourne. Have a look at your local area, have a look at Google Maps, and look at those areas where there is water. Some of those are quite fishable. They can be little dams like this, they can be little reservoirs, they can be lakes. They can be areas that drains empty into. They can be water retarding basins, but it's surprising that the fish that can be in them.
The rig I'm using is very simple. I've just got a little float, very small float, light float, which I can adjust up and down. I've got some little float stoppers there to that I can pull it up and down to adjust it. I've got quite a bit of line, so I'm going to be fishing on the bottom here. I've got a bunch of split shot just there, down to a lightweight trace, a size 16 hook, and little pieces of worm.
I was using worm to hopefully catch some of the little redfin that were in here. Now, I wasn't casting out that far. I just wanted to make sure that I cast far enough from the bank so that I wasn't disturbing the fish and they couldn't see me. The other thing was that I was casting out over the top of burley that I'd thrown in. So you can cast in, you can cast beyond where your burley spot is, as long as you're throwing the burley to the same spot each time. You cast beyond that and then just reel in so your float then just rests over the top of that burley. Once you do that, you've got a target zone for those fish to collect and hopefully find your bait. I was using a really fine, thin float. The reason for that is that I was first off fishing in fairly shallow water, so it didn't have to be that big. And also being very thin makes it very easy for the fish to pull under. The great thing about that is that they feel virtually no weight at all when they pick up the bait, and they're more inclined to hold it rather than drop it if they feel resistance. I see people fishing with bubble floats and large floats, which can be good, but on the tough days where the fish might be very cautious or picky, a very light float is the best way to present that bait. Now, the ideal way of presenting these floats is to have the stem, that yellow piece, just sticking out of the water. The rest of the body of the float is underneath. So when that fish pulls on the line, it has got only the buoyancy of that stem holding it up. That makes it so much more convincing to the fish that that bait has got nothing dangerous attached to it, and they're more likely to be caught. The next thing you need to do is throw out the burley to the spot you'll be fishing so that you can cast right over the top of it and attract the fish. This example shows the float set properly. You've got the stem out of the water, you've got the body underneath the water. So the only resistance to the fish is that stem. If that float goes under, if it rises up, if it goes sideways, you know that there's fish activity, and that's when you've got to spring into action. And once that float starts moving, get ready to strike.
Let's see what we've got. There's fish off. Here's a little roach. There we go. Okay. Little roach. Actually, it's not so little. That's quite a good size for a roach. Oops, and off.
Not only are floats one of the best bite indicators you can get, they are just amazing fun to use. Watching a float go under is incredibly satisfying. I'm targeting some of the smaller fish here, like this roach and some of the little redfin, but there are carp in here, and that can be pretty exciting when you hook one of those. So I've used this before for species like trout, for redfin, for carp. I've even used it when I've been fishing backwaters for some of our native species. Float fishing on piers for garfish and mullet and even bream and some of the parrotfish can be good fun as well. So it's worth having a shot at float fishing because not only is it satisfying, but it does catch a few fish. The key to success with float fishing is to make sure that you cast over the top of your burley. So what you're doing is you're regularly throwing out, say, golf ball size handfuls of burley and then casting over the top. If you do it properly, the fish will actually be waiting there for the bait to sink.
Got something now, and oh my goodness, yet another roach. This is the fourth one. Can't get past these today. Still better than nothing. Oop, and release.
Unfortunately, the camera wasn't picking up on the float, but at this point it was moving around a little bit. As soon as you see that float moving around, you know that there's activity and you've got to strike into it. Here I struck into what was a little redfin, and you'll see he just gets off at the end. Now, after a while, the fish were biting pretty consistently. Here I'm hooking into another one. The thing was, though, I wasn't getting bites if the float moved away from the target zone. Anyway, here I'd got over the top of my burley and caught this nice little roach. And I've been catching a few of these. This technique also works really well on some of the stocked lakes. So when the Victorian Fisheries Authority stocks lakes with trout, for instance, they respond really well to this technique. Now here I cast into a point further out, beyond where my burley is, and then I just wind in a little bit to get the float over the top where I've been throwing all of that burley. Now that I have the float over the top, the bait is actually sitting on the bottom in the middle of that burley. So the fish are picking around looking for food, and the only actual food item is on my hook. If you do cast in and miss your spot, your target zone, like I've done here, just try and get that float over the top. If you can't do that, then just wind in and recast. The accuracy will often get you more fish.
Okay, there's something having a go at that. Yep. This time I've got another roach. Wow. This one's the smallest so far.
I wanted to give an indication here of how quickly you can catch fish once you're doing this properly. So you've got burley in the area, so you've got your target area set up, the fish are feeding, they're waiting for your bait. It doesn't take long at all. And here I've just cast in, I wait for a couple of seconds, I start to see a little bit of activity on that float. I just wait until I see it go under, then I strike in. That's it, I've actually hooked that fish in that time. And there are so many little waterways where this type of fishing is really effective.
So that's how simple float fishing is. Look, it's really worth a try. You don't need much special gear, just a few floats and a few split shot. Some small hooks help, even though sometimes you catch fish bigger than you expect. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. And make sure that you give us a thumbs up and subscribe so you get access to all of the videos I've put out. And if you're interested in the techniques and the gear that I'm using, go to my website, howtofish.com.au. See you next time.